a friend of the program and a friend in general. Back here on the program, the great Robert Griffin III on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, RG3?
I'm doing good, Rich. Always a pleasure to be on with you. And, man, we got some interesting storylines, don't we?
Don't you think? Don't you think? Before we get to the Super Bowl, I want to hit you on the Ravens. Obviously,
Yeah.
you know Lamar, you know the system, you know the area, you know all of it. What went wrong for them, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line for the Ravens was they needed Lamar Jackson to be Superman, but they didn't allow him to use all his powers. I think that's what it boiled down to. They dropped back to throw 82% of the time in the game. And that's not to say that doesn't put Lamar Jackson in a good spot. He's a great thrower of the football and great from the pocket. But when you watch that touchdown at the beginning of the game to Zay Flowers, Lamar held the ball for 8 seconds, broke an unbelievable tackle in the pocket, and then made a play on an off-schedule throw. And I think that's what he was looking for the majority of the rest of the game, just giving his guys opportunities to make plays down the field. But I think that Todd Monken, looking back on it, we'll see that in the AFC Championship game, when you're at home and you have a team in the Chiefs that is banged up, you got to run the football. And it's not just handing it off to Gus Edwards or Justice Hill. They needed to run Lamar Jackson from the beginning of the game, early and often, get him at least 15 carries because you've got nothing else to play for. You've got nothing else to lose. That's your opportunity. You have to put Lamar in the best situation to win, and that's allowing him to use his arm and his leg.
So the question I have as a follow-up is what does this mean for Lamar? And by that I mean this. All season long, we're talking about how he's the MVP because Todd Monken brought in a system that allows him to have ownership of an offense as a passer. And now Here we are having a conversation how he didn't make the Super Bowl, and it's likely he will be named MVP of the season at the Super Bowl the Thursday before, and he's not there as a player because he didn't run it enough. And so what do we make of Lamar's ability to overcome all this himself?
Yeah, I don't think the way you phrase that is a little. I don't agree with the phrasing of it. It's not that Lamar and the Ravens aren't in the Super Bowl because he didn't run it enough. I think you have to look at this and not be so. And I'm not saying that you are. Obviously, our industry is very reactionary, right? So Lamar and the Ravens come up short. It's, hey, we got to hold his ass to the fire and charge him up here and compare him to the great quarterbacks that have ever played the game, like the Peyton Mannings, who didn't win a Super Bowl till his 9th year, and this is Lamar's 6th year. So Peyton Manning never won a Super Bowl game, or not, should I say, a playoff game where his team ran the ball 6 times outside of him running because Peyton wasn't a runner. So I think some of those comparisons need to be thrown to the wayside. And I also think for when it comes to Todd Monken, it's okay to say that he had a bad game when it comes to calling the plays in the AFC Championship game. Like, this is one of the best Ravens teams of all time, not just on paper, but in reality. They hadn't been to an AFC Championship game in 11 seasons, 11 years. So they should celebrate the fact that they have a young core, and they should celebrate the fact that they have an offense that's only going to continue to get better. But I don't think that the Ravens offensively were in sync since they took that break in Week 18. You look at them against the 49ers, you look at them against the Miami Dolphins, they were dominant on both sides of the ball. But that break, and then getting back to playing the Houston Texans in the divisional round, they just weren't really clicking. Lamar ran for 100 yards, and they won that game, but they weren't firing on all cylinders. I think that's something that they should look at moving forward, and they should play their guys through the entirety of the season, whether they get that bye or not. And I don't think that this is the time to say that Lamar Jackson and the Ravens can't get it done. Like, it's really hard to make it to an AFC Championship game. It's really hard to win Super Bowls. And Peyton Manning, one of the greatest that's ever played this game, will be the first one to tell you that, you got to keep just throwing darts at the board. And I think the Ravens made championship moves this past offseason. They went and got Roquan Smith last year. They brought in a bunch of guys, OBJ, Zay Flowers, and Monken, to surround Lamar. And they just got to keep making those moves, and eventually they will get there because Lamar Jackson is that dynamic of a quarterback.
All right, then let's turn our attention to the Lions before we turn our attention to the Super Bowl itself. What's your opinion of the Lions' second half performance, and throw the coach in that mix as well?
Yeah, Rich, you're hitting them out the park right now. I'm a huge, bite the kneecaps kind of guy. You know what I mean? I don't have, some people don't even think I have kneecaps anymore because of some of the injuries that I went through. But Dan Campbell, he made the mistake of being, I feel like he felt like he was forced to do what he had been doing up into that point. Right. His identity was aggressiveness on fourth down. His identity was, I'm going to put it in the hands of my quarterback and my team, and we're going to go make it happen. And that's what got them to the NFC Championship game. But at some point, your gut has to tell you, because this is not about the analytics. I know I'm not a pro or against analytics guy. I think it all works in conjunction together. But your gut has to tell you momentum is a real thing. And getting those 3 points on the board on one of those 2 fourth downs where they went for it was going to pay dividends for them for the rest of that game. There's no excuse for running the ball on third down and having to burn a timeout there late in the game on the goal line, which they ended up needing would have needed on the next possession to get the ball back anyway and not kick that onside. But the bottom line is they ran the ball 21 times for 148 yards in the first half and only ran it 7 times in the second half. That could be circumstantial based off the flow of the game, but the Lions should have won that game. There's no doubt about it. Being up 24-7 at half, they were dominant. They should have won that game, and they didn't because of some of the decisions that they made in the second half.
The host of RG3 and the Ones podcast, I've been on it. Everyone should check it out. It's a great show, and RG3 back here on the Rich Eisen Show. Super Bowl 58 is going to come down to what, Robert?
Ooh, it's going to come down to defense. I'll tell you the quarterback stories, right? Patrick Mahomes, he's the greatest quarterback in the galaxy. He's doing this and made it to the Super Bowl with the worst receiving core he's ever had, but also the best defense that he's ever had. Brock Purdy is not a game manager. I don't know how many times I can continue to say that. He's a difference maker. He is the difference for the 49ers from that Super Bowl 54 rematch with the Chiefs, because he's a better player than Jimmy Garoppolo is. But it's going to come down to the 49ers defense, in my opinion. The Chiefs have shown all year that they will show up on the defense side of the ball. Chris Jones, even though he didn't have a bunch of splash plays in the AFC Championship game, his presence alone helps the rest of that defensive line. But the 49ers, the fact that they gave up so much to the Lions was alarming. This defense doesn't seem to be quite as dominant as we all remember them to be from those earlier years in 2019 when they made it to the Super Bowl. If they show up the same way that they showed up against the Lions, they're going to get beat by the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think the Chiefs are going to try to take advantage of that with Isaiah Pacheco. And they really gotten into a rhythm now. Travis Kelce's reemergence has been amazing. And I know people will say, well, what do you mean his reemergence? Well, the last 3 games of the year, he only had 29 yards per game and 0 touchdowns. Now I think he's averaging 82 yards per game here in the playoffs, and he's got 3 touchdowns. So he's playing at a high level. They're attacking teams the way that they know they can, and Mahomes is managing the game, which is kind of shocking for a guy who we all consider to be the best quarterback many of us have ever seen.
Well, and again, the whole game manager, game changer conversation is every game changer needs to manage the game at some point, and every manager of the game needs to change it every now and then. And the question is who's excellent at both, to be quite honest with you. Like, that's honestly, Tom Brady's the greatest game manager maybe we've ever seen because he knows what to do. And Peyton Manning is maybe on par with him, if not better than Brady, right? Like, neck up ability to figure out what's going on pre-snap. And honestly, my Wolverines almost lost or I know everybody keeps thinking that the game against Washington was in the bag. That's such a way to look back at it. But at the time, I mean, Penix has a great ability to see pre-snap what's going on. That's again for another day. But what do you see in Purdy, though, when there's mistakes that are made, where the ones he threw to the Packers, one of them was caught by the Lions. And if that happens in this game, that's going to be an issue. Is he still growing, right? He's still kind of young enough to still be figuring out what it is, but at least the light goes on at the very end, right?
Yeah, I mean, Brock Purdy doesn't even have 30 starts, so he is certainly continuing to learn. And your point about game managers needing to be able to make game-changing plays and game changers being able to know how to manage is you're spot on. It's not a catch-22. It's just a never-ending cycle of continue to talk about the same things over and over again. When I look at Brock Purdy, I hear people say that they don't think he's a great player, that they don't think that he is a driving force for the San Francisco 49ers. And I disagree. I do believe he's a great player. And I think two guys you mentioned, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, they're two of the best system quarterbacks the league has ever seen. And people get upset when you say that. It's like, oh, you can't call Tom Brady a system guy. You can't call Peyton Manning a system guy. Okay, well, what did Tom Brady do when he went to Tampa Bay? He brought a system with him. What did Peyton Manning do when he left Indy and went to Denver? He brought a system with him. These guys have a system that they play their best in. Brock Purdy has that. If you move Brock Purdy to another team and put him in a different system, he's probably not going to play as well. But that's the truth for almost every quarterback that has success in their system. So I'm not going to sit here and punish Brock Purdy because he's the last pick in the draft. I'm not going to punish him because he's in a situation that everybody dreams of with countless weapons around him and the best play caller in all of football and Kyle Shanahan calling plays for him. I'm not going to punish him for that. I'm going to reward Brock Purdy by watching the tape, seeing that he's making the throws, putting the ball where it needs to be at the time it's supposed to be there. And the number one thing that he does that adds an extra element to this offense for the Niners is his ability to make off-schedule plays with his feet. I'm talking about extending plays and scrambling. You saw that in the NFC Championship game, but I've seen that since he was playing at Iowa State in college. So I'm a believer in Brock Purdy. I do think that he is a great player. And I know he's not Michael Jordan if they're the Chicago Bulls, but, you know, he ain't a bench player either. You know what I'm saying? He like Tony Kukoc. He can give you 20 if you need it, but he also knows how to get those other guys in position to score and be the best players that they can be.
So if he's Kukoc, who's the Pippen piss that he's starting? Is it Garoppolo? Is Garoppolo the Pippen? You know, the one that that he's on the floor? No, I'm just saying, you know, I mean.
No. Listen, if we're talking about the Bulls, because I was a huge Bulls fan growing up. So I think their Jordan is Christian McCaffrey. That's their Jordan. Debo is their Scottie Pippen. I would say that Brock Purdy is their Tony Kukoc. And, you know, then they got like Kyle Juszczyk, who's their Steve Kerr. He's going to give you a couple solid points here and there that are going to be impactful, just like that catch on the sideline where he was tiptoeing in his Jordans. I could keep going breaking this thing down, but the bottom line is that Brock Purdy he might not be the MVP of that team, but he is playing at such a high level, you can't win without him.
Kittle is Rodman, right?
Has to be. Come on now.
Kittle's the Rodman here?
Kittle's Rodman. I like the joke he cracked at the end of the game on the podium, too.
Sure,
so we got some good comps.
And obviously
here.
Shanahan's the Phil Jackson, if he just, you know, had the rings to go with it, and he might have one in a couple of Sundays. Who do you think wins it, Robert? What do you think takes it?
Yeah, I mean, I got to start it off by saying, you know, I got a ton of respect for both teams and what they've accomplished and how they got there. But I'm not going to bet against Patrick Mahomes. We talking about the Bulls. Well, he's got a Jordan-like trait. You know, one of the biggest mistakes the Ravens made going to that game was they got the kicker to beef with him in pregame.
What was that about? You know, I mean, and I know. You know, Tucker said there's nothing to it. Like, you know, this is just part and parcel of his warm-ups, and normally 90 minutes before, this is what he goes through. But that's Mahomes, that you're stretching directly in front of with Pat. And I love Tucker, and I love, I cape for kickers more than anyone else. But, Kelsey called him, an F and D on his pod this week. If that's what you want to be like, then I'll oblige you by removing your gear. And it's just like, I don't kind of get that, Robert.
Rich, I don't like to see GOATs beefing with each other. You got the greatest kicker of all time, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of other people, and Justin Tucker, going up against soon-to-be GOAT Mahomes and the soon-to-be GOAT tight end, if he's not already the GOAT tight end, and Travis Kelce. I just don't like seeing them all button heads. I understand both sides of it. Does Tucker use both sides of the field to warm up? Yes. After maybe the first time they kind of threw his stuff away, maybe he should have been like, all right, I'm just going to leave. Because I don't think anyone would have noticed. But as it kept going, then it became a storyline. Now you pissed off Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And I don't know if you noticed this, Rich, but they seem to play with a little bit more fire, just a little bit more fire early in the game.
Yeah,
everything meant everything. And I'm like, God dang it, what are we doing here?
I didn't quite get that whole thing. Before I let you go, breaking news, it looks like the Seahawks are hiring Mike MacDonald as their next head coach. What's your first blush opinion on that, Robert?
Oh, phenomenal hire. I didn't know that was happening.
Yep.
Mike MacDonald had an opportunity to be in meeting rooms with him, see how he runs, not necessarily the defense at that time, but how he ran his position group. Got a chance to obviously see what he was doing, there at Michigan as well. So MacDonald is a great hire. They're going to play defense at the highest level, bringing back that Legion of Boom type of defense. Where it's going to be very multiple. And I think for the what do they call the 12s?
Yeah.
For the Seahawks, I mean, my God, I don't think they could have got a better hire. I know some of them wanted Dan Quinn, but what they're getting in Mike MacDonald is a guy that's going to know how to build a roster, know how to build a defense, and allow his quarterback to go out there and do what he does best.
Okay, yeah. And then obviously the Seahawks have a pick, 19th overall, and there could be some quarterbacks available, including a kid from Michigan. That's been some of the mock drafts that they've been throwing out there. I don't know if they'll go in that direction. Obviously, if you got a defensive-minded head coach, you never know. But I'm just throwing stuff out there. And do you have any opinion on what the Bears should do before I let you go now? You got any opinion on that?
Yeah. No. The Chicago Bears, they should trade the first pick, in my opinion, and build around Justin Fields. But I have a differing opinion on why they should do it. I know in the NFL, the use of the fifth-year option is always it's a negotiating tactic, right? You get to keep the guy for a little bit longer and not have to pay him as soon. But I think the Bears should decline Justin Fields' fifth-year option and allow Justin Fields and Matt Eberflus to basically play out the year for the jobs. And I say that, Rich, because they decided to keep the head coach. If you decide to keep the head coach and bring in a new quarterback, the likelihood of that team being great is very slim. So now you're going to fire that head coach and bring in a new head coach, and your starting quarterback, the new franchise guy, is going to have two head coaches in 2 years. I wouldn't do that. Justin Fields is an ascending player. I believe they went 4-1 down the stretch. He's showing you that he has all the skills to win in this league today, beat you with his arm, beat you with his legs, beat you with his mind. Fully flesh that out, build the roster around him. And if it doesn't work out, guess what? Your team will be better now when you bring in your new head coach and you bring in your new quarterback, and they'll be able to start from a much higher place. That's what I would do.
Wow.
Now, I'm a believer in Justin Fields. I think he will be the Bears franchise quarterback. It's just a matter of how they build around him.
Wow. I mean, that would be dicey that you don't even pick up his fifth-year option and pass up on Caleb Williams. We call that zagging when everyone else is zigging, Robert. Wow, yeah. That is quite something. All right, brother, thank you so much for your time. It's always great to chat with you. I love it. I love your energy. I love your thought process, and I love what you're doing with your pod. Thanks for having me on there, and thanks for completing a home and home, I guess, the last 2 times we've chatted.
Appreciate you, Rich. It's always a blessing, and you've always been supportive of me, man. I just want all your listeners to know just how great of a guy you are, and I appreciate it because this industry can be pretty cutthroat and backstabby. You're not that guy, and I appreciate you fully for that, man.
You bet. That's Robert Griffin III. Check out RG3 and the Ones, his pod, of course, whenever he appears on ESPN. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.